Rebuilding intimacy after betrayal from pornography is possible. And in this video, we're going to talk about the path to healing our marriage. Hello, my friend. If you're new here, my name's Zach, and on this channel, we help Christians, husbands, live uncommon lives. And in this step towards uncommon living, many men are going to be struggling with pornography. I did for years. I was trapped in the cycle of viewing pornography, swearing I wouldn't do it again, and coming back to it before I was married, and unfortunately, I brought that into my marriage. By the grace of God, I'm free of porn for over 14 years now, and intimacy has been rebuilt in my marriage, and it is so much stronger than it ever was before. In fact, I did not realize I could love my wife as much as I do today. And so if that sounds good to you, I hope it does. Let's dive in and discover together how to rebuild that intimate relationship with our wife. All right, the first one is open and honest communication. So begin with open communication, like you and your wife should feel safe to express feelings of hurt, betrayal, frustration, even hope without judgment. And this can be hard from a husband's point of view. I mean, this can be hard when we're the one that screwed everything up, and then our wife is telling us how much she hurting and how much we betrayed her. And sometimes this can go on for years after. In fact, 14 years later, this does not happen often, but sometimes my wife will still get uneasy and triggered by something, just like I can get triggered. And she can start wanting to talk about it. And if I'm not careful, and if you're not careful, we can shut them down and make them feel unsafe to express this. And let's just be real. You and I made the bed that we're laying in, like literally. Like we are the ones that caused this. And one of the things we can do to live out what God tells us to do as husbands, by being that sacrifice, that sacrificial living for our wives, is to be a safe space. And so if you get hurt or triggered by these, you're not giving her a safe space. Now, if you are hurt and triggered, by the way, this is where you'd have your community of men around you, so you can talk to them about it. But please do not shut her down. Open and honest communication is so crucial, especially we're talking about intimacy today. And that can feel very vulnerable. It is a vulnerable thing. And so we really need to come back to this open and honest communication so that the healing process can continue. We need to foster understanding and create foundation of transparency. Like if we were trapped in pornography, we were not living a transparent life. We're never going to do that again. We're going to be 100% transparent, and we're going to be empathetic. Okay? And so it all comes back to that every single time. But the second thing is that we're going to cultivate this emotional intimacy first. And see, in that open and honest communication, a lot of things that happen within that and emotional intimacy is you and I opening up these bad boys right here. Like, we need to be listeners first. This is not, let's get physical. We're not trying to have sex with our wife. We are emotionally connecting to her because she's an emotional, spiritual, and physical being, and she deserves that type of intimacy from us. So how do we build this emotional intimacy? I'm glad you asked. Here's how we do it. By listening, by having deep conversations, by looking inward. How does something make you feel? What are you dreaming of? And this requires some time in learning this skill. Like if you've never told your wife what you're thinking and feeling, she might say, hey, what are you thinking? And you say nothing. Now I know there's that joke going around that us guys live in this nothing box. Come on, guys. We know, yes, it's nothing, but if we dig a little bit, there's something behind the nothing that we can share. Like talk about your day. Ask her about hers. Listen to what she has to say and ask follow-up questions to that. Like, how was your day? Rough. Oh, mine was blah, blah, blah. No. Oh, it was rough. What was going on? What made it hard? Empathize. I'm sorry that happened to you. This is how we build some emotional intimacy within the conversation. The other thing we can do is do shared activities together. This builds emotional intimacy. You don't need to go travel the world together on vacation. You can, that'd be cool. But you can't just go for a walk or a bike ride, or I love to fly fish. Go fly fishing with my wife. That builds that emotional intimacy. Try to do an activity they like to do. Pro tip, I just listed what I like to do. So you're also going to do things they want to do. I'll tell you something I do that builds emotional intimacy with my wife that I can't stand. We watch Hallmark Christmas movies. It's coming up on that season. Oh my gosh, I can't stand them. But you know who likes them? She does. And so do you know who watches them? I do. And I don't feel like that's a connective thing, but she does. She thinks it's great. And bonus, she'll sit with me through my action movies. All right, the next one is that we are going to rebuild that physical intimacy. This is important, but we need to be careful. Like, you're like walking with a dozen eggs here. You don't want to crack the shells. So here's some tips with physical intimacy. I don't know where you're at, but when I think of physical intimacy, I'm automatically going to sex in my mind. Like, oh, that's what he's talking about. No, yes, eventually, but start holding hands, hugging her, kissing her. This is the physical intimacy that usually leads to that eventually. But this is what I'm talking about. Every woman is going to react differently. Your wife might be going through the healing process quicker, or she might not be going through the healing process, but still wants that physical intimacy. Because here's what can happen. In your wife's mind, you were just looking at images of other women. And what it does to them, unfortunately, is it makes them not feel good about themselves. And that makes sense if you think about it. And so this physical intimacy is an important thing. And she might move quicker than what you're ready for. She gets to decide how quickly this moves. And again, this comes back to that open and honest communication of asking what they'd want. I know for my wife, she wants me just to put my hand on her back when she's doing something, when I'm talking to her, or on my shoulder. That physical contact, just putting my hand on her arm or holding her hand. Talk with your wife. What does she desire from you? You know, oftentimes, man, we can get selfish and think about what we desire. Instead of, when you're building this physical intimacy, yes, what you want does matter eventually, but what does she want? We could be selfish where we're just thinking about what we want, especially when we've been binging with pornography. We've kind of been conditioned to think in our wants. And so this is where we rebuild that physical closeness around what she's desiring. So talk about it. The next one is that we're going to renew that spiritual connection. Again, connection and intimacy within marriage is much more than physical. Physical does have a lot to do with it. It's emotional, physical, and spiritual. And my friend, I haven't really met people that are super connected, honestly, spiritually, that they are viewing pornography at the same time. Like, I'm trying to forget about that part of me. In the past, when I was viewing pornography, I was trying not to remember that. We are going to remember that and sew that back together. Here's how we connect spiritually. Pray together. If you feel awkward praying with your wife, and I know that's common to verbally out loud pray together, embrace that awkwardness, embrace the awkward and do it anyways. God, trust me, if you're stumbling over your words or saying the wrong thing in your prayers, your wife is not worried about that. She's floored that you're leading the way in this area. The next thing you can do is do a Bible study together. Read scripture together. Talk about God together. Serving together can draw us closer spiritually to our wife. Spiritual intimacy can be both of you seeing God at work in nature. Like, you can go for a walk together and look at what God has done and talk about it. This is how we form that spiritual connection that's so crucial within marriage. All right, and the fifth thing that we're going to talk about in rebuilding intimacy is so important. And again, it goes back to that open and honest communication, but practicing forgiveness and patience. And when I'm talking about practicing forgiveness and patience, I'm not saying you telling her to forgive you. I will come through this camera and knock you upside the head if I hear you saying that. Like, forgiveness is a gradual journey that she's going to come to her own conclusions on. It is not up to you to decide when that happens. Hopefully she has good counsel around her and she's coming up. This is your part. How can you practice forgiveness for yourself? I know oftentimes when I'm wanting my wife to forgive me quickly, it's because I don't forgive myself. And so check in with your heart and mind. Do you need to talk to God and ask Him to forgive you? It's important. And this patience journey, like I said, 14 years later, my wife once in a while will still get triggered and worry or need to look at my phone. She has the right. It is all open to her. That's not a lack of trust of me. And if it is, it's because I made that bed. This is how we walk out this journey of intimacy with our wife. We need to practice forgiveness. Like marriage, regardless of the pornography struggle, is about forgiving others and moving towards reconciliation. I mean, it doesn't take long to offend each other. And we can just walk in that. But when it comes to the pornography stuff introduced into the marriage, it's even more important. See, to speed this process along, you can't fight when she's struggling to forgive. You have to acknowledge the pain that you caused. You have to acknowledge that you hurt her. You have to acknowledge that it's on you. And if you're placing blame, you are slowing it all down, and it's not a healthy place to live. So I hope these 5 tips help you to have a more intimate relationship that you ever had with your wife, and so that you can have a thriving and healthy marriage. God bless you in your journey.